Good morning. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like you were holding back pieces of yourself? Like you were rationing out your love or your truth because you weren't sure the person in front of you could handle all of it? Love is a force that has the power to transform us, to connect us, and to heal the wounds we often carry silently. But for love to fulfill its potential, it must be wholehearted. When love is fragmented, incomplete, or offered in halves, it cannot create the depth of connection we long for. Half love, while tempting in its simplicity, ultimately fails to nurture the kind of bond that allows two people to feel seen, valued, and safe. To love wholeheartedly is to show up fully, not just with the parts of ourselves that are polished and easy to share, but also with the raw, unfiltered aspects of who we are. It means stepping into vulnerability and trusting that the person receiving our love will honor it, even when it doesn't come wrapped in perfection. Half love, on the other hand, holds back. It hides behind fear, uncertainty, and the need for control. It whispers, "I'll give this much, but no more," as if love can be rationed like a scarce resource. The truth is, when love is given in pieces, it doesn't protect us from pain, it creates distance. It keeps us separate from the very intimacy we crave. When we engage in half love, we create a dynamic where no one feels fully satisfied. The giver is left feeling incomplete, knowing that they aren't truly sharing their heart. The receiver senses the hesitation, the unspoken conditions, and the limits of what's being offered. This dynamic breeds insecurity, mistrust, and over time, resentment. Instead of building bridges, half love erects walls. Instead of fostering connection, it plants seeds of doubt. It's important to understand that wholehearted love is not about perfection. It's not about always saying or doing the right thing. Instead, it's about intention and presence. It's about saying, "I'm here, I see you, and I'm willing to do the work to love you fully, flaws and all." This kind of love requires courage because it involves risk, the risk of rejection, the risk of being misunderstood, and the risk of heartbreak. But with that risk comes the possibility of true connection, the kind of bond that makes us feel alive and deeply rooted in our humanity. Half love, by contrast, often stems from fear. Fear of being hurt, fear of being vulnerable, fear of showing parts of ourselves that we worry are unworthy. But what we fail to see is that by holding back, we deny ourselves the opportunity to experience the fullness of love. We keep ourselves in a space where the love we give and receive feels transactional rather than transformative. We might tell ourselves that half love is better than no love at all. But in reality, half love leaves us feeling lonelier than we would be on our own. It creates an ache that comes from knowing we're not fully engaged in the relationship, not with the other person, and not with ourselves. To love wholeheartedly is to let go of the idea that love can ever be safe or predictable. It's recognizing that love is inherently messy, unpredictable, and at times uncomfortable. But it is also what gives life its richness and meaning. Wholehearted love challenges us to grow, to be better, and to embrace the complexity of being human. It asks us to show up not just for the easy moments, but for the hard ones too. It asks us to lean in when we want to pull away, to speak up when we want to stay silent, and to choose compassion over judgment when faced with imperfection. When we choose half love, we rob ourselves of the chance to experience love in its truest form. We settle for something shallow when what we really want is depth. We allow fear to dictate the terms of our relationships instead of letting love guide us toward connection and growth. Half love might seem like a way to avoid pain, but it's actually a way of ensuring it. By contrast, wholehearted love, though risky, has the power to heal and transform in ways that are nothing short of extraordinary. You are worthy of a love that embraces all of who you are. Let those words sink in for a moment, because too often we doubt their truth. We live in a world that tells us to curate ourselves, to show only the parts of us that fit neatly into others' expectations. We are taught to trim away the edges, to dim our brightness, and to conceal our flaws so we can appear more lovable. But the reality is that true love, the kind that nourishes and sustains, doesn't require you to shrink, hide, or edit yourself. It asks you to show up fully, exactly as you are. This belief that you must be something other than yourself to be loved is a lie we've been conditioned to accept. Maybe it comes from experiences where love felt conditional, contingent upon how well you performed, how agreeable you were, or how much you sacrificed. Perhaps it stems from relationships where vulnerability was met with criticism or abandonment. Whatever the source, this belief can take root so deeply that we begin to question our inherent worthiness. We start to believe that only parts of us deserve love, the parts that are pleasing, easy, or polished. But the truth is, you are not meant to be loved in fragments. You are not meant to be accepted only when you meet certain standards or fit into a certain mold. The kind of love that truly honors your worth sees beyond the surface. It doesn't flinch at your imperfections, nor does it ask you to pretend they don't exist. This love understands that you are a tapestry of strengths and struggles, beauty and messiness, light and shadow. And it doesn't try to pull those threads apart. Instead, it embraces the entirety of who you are, knowing that your wholeness is what makes you unique, human, and worthy. But here's the thing, to receive this kind of love, you must first believe that you deserve it. And that's not always easy. Self-doubt has a way of creeping in, whispering that you're too much or not enough. It convinces you to settle for relationships where you're only partially seen, partially valued, and partially loved. It tells you that asking for more is selfish or unrealistic, yet deep down, you know that partial love leaves you feeling empty. It's like trying to quench your thirst with a single drop of water. It's not enough. It will never be enough. When you allow yourself to believe in your worthiness, something shifts. You start to recognize the difference between love that feels conditional and love that feels genuine. Conditional love might flatter you or make you feel validated temporarily, but it always comes with strings attached. Genuine love, on the other hand, feels freeing. It allows you to breathe deeply, to relax into the relationship without fear of judgment or rejection. It creates space for you to be unapologetically yourself. This kind of love doesn't mean the absence of challenges or conflicts. In fact, it requires effort, honesty, and mutual commitment. But what sets it apart is its foundation and unwavering acceptance of who you are at your core. This love doesn't ask you to change, though it may inspire you to grow. It doesn't demand perfection, though it values authenticity. It doesn't shy away from the messy parts of life. It embraces them as part of the human experience. You are worthy of this love not because of what you achieve, how you look, or how well you meet someone else's expectations, but simply because you exist. Your worth is not something you need to prove or earn. It is inherent, unshakable, and constant, no matter how many mistakes you've made or how many times you've doubted yourself. Believing in this worthiness is not always easy, especially when the world around you sends mixed messages. But the moment you start to internalize this truth, you begin to set a new standard for the love you allow into your life. You stop settling for relationships that make you feel small or incomplete. You start to seek connections that affirm your wholeness. Half love feels safe, but it ultimately erodes your sense of self-worth. On the surface, it may seem like a rational choice, something that allows you to stay guarded, to avoid risking too much, and to maintain a sense of control in your relationships. It's the kind of love that says, I'll give just enough to stay connected, but not so much that I could get hurt. And yet, this calculated way of loving doesn't actually protect you. Instead, it slowly chips away at the foundation of your worth, leaving you questioning your value and your capacity to be fully loved. There's a certain allure to half love. It's predictable, manageable, and doesn't demand the kind of emotional vulnerability that can feel terrifying. But the trade-off for that perceived safety is steep. Half love creates a dynamic where you're constantly tiptoeing around authenticity. You're holding back parts of yourself, your fears, your desires, your quirks, because you're afraid those parts might not be accepted. You filter your words, your actions, and even your emotions to fit into the narrow space that half love allows. Over time, this erodes not just your relationships, but your own sense of self. When you settle for half love, you're sending a message to yourself, whether consciously or not. That message says, this is all I deserve. My full self is too much, too messy, or too complicated to be loved. Even if those words never cross your mind, the act of accepting less than wholehearted love reinforces this belief. And beliefs, when left unchecked, have a way of shaping how we see ourselves and what we allow into our lives. The longer you engage in relationships built on half love, the more you internalize the idea that this is as good as it gets. Half love isn't just about what you receive from others, it's also about what you give. When you engage in half loving someone else, you're also denying yourself the fullness of connection. Love that is given cautiously in measured doses doesn't leave room for the transformative power of vulnerability. Vulnerability is the lifeblood of real love. It's what allows two people to see and accept each other for who they truly are. But when you hold back, when you love with hesitation, you miss out on that depth. You're left with something that feels more like an arrangement than a relationship, more like a transaction than a bond. It's easy to convince yourself that half love is better than no love at all. It's easy to rationalize staying in relationships where you're not fully seen or valued because on the surface it feels less painful than being alone. But loneliness within a relationship, the loneliness that comes from being only partially loved, is one of the most isolating feelings in the world. It's a constant reminder that something is missing, that the connection you're craving is just out of reach. The fear that drives half love often comes from past experiences of rejection, betrayal, or unmet expectations. These experiences leave scars, and those scars can make you hesitant to open yourself up again. But the irony is that in trying to protect yourself from pain, you're actually creating more of it. Half love might feel like a shield, but it's a flimsy one. It doesn't prevent heartbreak, it prolongs it. It keeps you stuck in a cycle of longing for more while convincing yourself that more isn't possible. To break free from half love, you have to start by recognizing its cost. It might feel safe in the moment, but over time it takes a toll on your spirit. It diminishes your capacity to believe in your own worth and in the possibility of love that is whole, authentic, and fulfilling. It keeps you from experiencing the kind of connection that reminds you what it means to be fully alive, fully seen, and fully loved. Recognizing this is the first step toward choosing something different, something braver, riskier, and infinitely more rewarding. Having the courage to say no to relationships that only offer fragments of love is one of the hardest yet most liberating decisions you can make. There's something deeply human about wanting to hold on to what is familiar, even when it falls short of what you deserve. We tell ourselves stories to justify staying in these relationships. We tell ourselves that something is better than nothing, that it might get better, or that this is all I'm capable of receiving. These stories may comfort us temporarily, but they also keep us trapped in patterns that erode our sense of self and leave us unfulfilled. Saying no to half love is not about anger or bitterness. It's about clarity and self-respect. It's about recognizing when a relationship, whether romantic, platonic, or familial, is not meeting the fundamental need for mutual care, presence. It's about listening to that quiet voice inside you that whispers, this isn't enough. That voice can be hard to hear when it's drowned out by fear of being alone, fear of hurting someone else, or fear of not finding anything better. But the courage to act on that voice comes from understanding that staying in relationships that only offer fragments ultimately costs you more than walking away ever could. When you remain in a relationship where love is given in halves, you start to adapt to its limits. You shrink yourself to fit into the narrow space that the relationship allows. You stop asking for what you truly need because you've learned it won't be given. You suppress your own desires, opinions, or emotions to avoid conflict or to preserve the illusion of connection. Over time, this can lead to a sense of detachment from your own identity. You start to forget what it feels like to be loved fully and unconditionally because you've been living in a space of compromise for so long. Saying no to half love is not a rejection of love itself. It's a declaration of what love should be. It's a statement that you refuse to accept anything less than a connection that honors your full humanity. This doesn't mean you're expecting perfection from others or from relationships. Love is messy and no one is perfect. But there is a difference between imperfection and incompleteness. Imperfect love makes room for growth, communication, and mutual effort. Incomplete love, on the other hand, offers only the bare minimum, leaving you to fill in the gaps on your own. The act of saying no to half love requires boundaries, and boundaries can feel like walls when you're not used to setting them. But boundaries are not about keeping people out, they're about keeping yourself safe. They're about saying, I value myself enough to only accept relationships that reflect that value. This can feel harsh at first, especially if you're someone who is used to prioritizing others over yourself. But over time, boundaries become a form of self-care, a way of honoring your own needs and desires. The courage to say no also comes from trusting that better connections are possible. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that what you have now is as good as it gets, especially if you've experienced repeated disappointments in the past. But love that is whole does exist. It may take time to find, and it may require a level of vulnerability that feels daunting, but it is worth holding out for. When you say no to half love, you're not closing yourself off. You're creating space for something greater to enter your life. This kind of courage doesn't come without discomfort. Walking away from a relationship, even one that isn't serving you, can be painful. There is grief in letting go of what could have been, in acknowledging that the connection you hoped for isn't possible. But this grief is temporary. The sense of liberation and self-respect that comes from choosing yourself, from refusing to settle, is lasting. It's a powerful reminder that you are the gatekeeper of your heart and that you have the right to decide who gets to enter and how they are allowed to treat you. Wholehearted love begins with loving yourself fully first. It's a simple truth, but one that often gets overlooked in the pursuit of connection with others. We are conditioned to seek love externally to find it in the validation of a partner, the admiration of friends, or the approval of family. While these forms of love are meaningful, they can never fill the void left by a lack of self-love. Without first embracing and accepting yourself fully, any love you seek or receive from others will feel incomplete, no matter how sincere it may be. Loving yourself fully is not about arrogance or self-absorption. It's not about pretending you're perfect or placing yourself above others. Instead, it's about treating yourself with the same kindness, compassion, and grace that you so willingly extend to those you care about. It's about recognizing your inherent worth, not because of what you've achieved or how others perceive you, but simply because you exist. This kind of love is radical in its simplicity, but transformative in its impact. It changes the way you show up in your relationships, in your work, and in the way you move through the world. When you lack self-love, it's easy to fall into the trap of seeking external validation to fill the gaps. You may find yourself chasing relationships that feel good in the moment, but leave you questioning your worth when they falter. You may bend over backward to meet others' expectations, hoping their approval will make you feel whole. But this is an impossible task. No amount of external validation can compensate for an internal sense of unworthiness. The love you receive from others will always feel fragile if you haven't built a foundation of love for yourself. Self-love is not something you achieve once and then carry with you effortlessly. It's a practice, one that requires consistent attention and effort. It means looking inward with honesty and compassion, acknowledging your strengths as well as your imperfections. It means forgiving yourself for your mistakes and giving yourself permission to grow. It means setting boundaries, not as a way of keeping others out, but as a way of protecting your peace and prioritizing your well-being. These practices take time and they are not always easy, but the more you cultivate self-love, the more natural it becomes to recognize your worth and to demand relationships that reflect it. Loving yourself fully also shifts the way you give love to others. When you are rooted in self-love, you no longer need relationships to complete you. Instead, they become a space for connection and growth. You are able to love others from a place of abundance rather than scarcity without clinging to them or fearing their loss. You become more open, more generous, and more authentic in the way you give and receive love. This kind of love, born from wholeness rather than need, is the foundation of deep and meaningful relationships. The path to self-love often involves unlearning the messages you've absorbed about your worth over the years. Maybe you were taught that your value depends on your achievements, your appearance, or your ability to make others happy. Maybe you've been in relationships where love felt conditional, where you had to meet certain standards to feel accepted. These experiences can leave lasting scars, but they do not define you. Loving yourself fully means rejecting those narratives and creating new ones, stories that affirm your worth and celebrate your uniqueness. One of the most important aspects of self-love is learning to be gentle with yourself. We live in a culture that glorifies perfection and productivity, often at the expense of our mental and emotional health. It's easy to be hard on yourself when you fall short of your own expectations or when life doesn't go as planned. But self-love means allowing yourself to be human. It means recognizing that your worth is not diminished by your flaws or failures. It means embracing yourself, not in spite of your imperfections, but because of them. You deserve love that is wild, honest, and unafraid of your light. It can be easy to settle for love that feels safe, predictable, or small. Sometimes we convince ourselves that this is enough, that wanting more is unrealistic or selfish. But the truth is, the kind of love that nourishes your soul is one that celebrates your brilliance, embraces your truth, and holds nothing back. This love doesn't shrink in the face of your intensity or turn away from the parts of you that shine the brightest. It steps forward with courage, matching your light with its own. Love that is wild is untamed by fear and unbound by convention. It allows itself to exist in its purest form without the need for masks or pretenses. This kind of love doesn't follow a script or conform to society's expectations. It grows and evolves in its own unique way, shaped by the authenticity of the people who share it. Wild love is not reckless or chaotic, it is free. It is love that moves with intention, yet refuses to be constrained by limiting beliefs or artificial boundaries. It encourages you to explore the depths of your own emotions and the breadth of your own possibilities, all while holding space for you to feel safe and secure. Honest love is the foundation of any relationship that seeks to thrive. It is love that tells the truth even when the truth is uncomfortable. It doesn't avoid hard conversations or gloss over the complexities of real connection. Instead, it embraces them as an essential part of intimacy. Honest love requires vulnerability, being willing to share your fears, your dreams, your doubts, and your desires without fear of judgment or rejection. This honesty creates a bond that is unshakable because it is built on trust. When love is honest, it allows you to be fully yourself without the need to edit or censor who you are. It accepts you as you are and meets you there, creating a space where growth and understanding can flourish. Love that is unafraid of your light is rare, but it is what you deserve. Your light, the unique brilliance that makes you who you are, can be intimidating to those who are not secure in themselves. Sometimes people will try to dim your light, not out of malice, but because they don't know how to handle its intensity. But the love you deserve doesn't ask you to tone yourself down or hide your gifts. It doesn't see your brightness as a threat, but as a blessing. This kind of love celebrates your successes, admires your strength, and supports your journey, even when it outpaces their own. It doesn't try to compete with you or control you. It simply stands beside you, basking in the warmth of your light and reflecting it back to you. To receive this kind of love, you must first believe you are worthy of it. This means letting go of the idea that you have to be smaller, quieter, or less complicated to be loved. It means refusing to settle for relationships that make you feel like you have to dim your light to make others comfortable. It means recognizing that the right love will amplify your brilliance, not diminish it. This doesn't mean the love you deserve will be perfect love. By its nature is imperfect. But it will be a love that meets you fully, that sees all of you and chooses you anyway. The love you deserve is one that aligns with your highest self. It challenges you to grow while honoring who you are in this moment. It is not afraid of the intensity of your passions, the depth of your emotions, or the power of your dreams. It is love that meets you where you are and journeys with you into the unknown. This kind of love is not about possession or control. It is about freedom and partnership. It's about standing in the fullness of your light and knowing you are seen, valued, and cherished. In the end, love is meant to be whole, unwavering, honest, and courageous. It begins with the relationship you have with yourself, the belief in your own worthiness, and the refusal to settle for anything less than a connection that honors your fullness. True love does not demand you to shrink, to hide, or to compromise your light. Instead, it celebrates you as you are, flaws and all. It is not found in halves, but in the wholehearted embrace of vulnerability, trust, and mutual respect. Choose love that inspires you, challenges you, and allows you to grow. You deserve nothing less.